Hello everyone, Omar Ramos here. Thank you so much for participating in Latinos Progresando's MEX Talk series. We'll get you to our scheduled program, but I want to take this opportunity to talk about the organization that's bringing you this unique event that celebrates the history, contributions, and rich diversity of the Mexican culture in the United States. Latinos Progresando is a critical organization right here in Chicago, and so much of their work is ensuring Chicago families have the access to the resources and opportunities they need to thrive. From supporting parent leadership and small business development, hosting community events that promote mental and physical wellness, and opening the doors for community members to have access to transportation and green space, LP is rooted in building on the community strengths. LP's reach extends beyond Chicago's southwest side as they provide immigration legal services to thousands of families every year from 22 states in the USA and more than 40 countries around the world. While a lot of LP's programming is built on a visionary framework to open up new opportunities for the community, the organization also takes the lead to meet immediate needs in times of crisis. This has never been more true than during COVID-19. As just a few examples, LP has mobilized to provide close to 30,000 units of PPE and 100,000 in financial assistance to families and small businesses, answer urgent immigration questions via a hotline, and serve more than 3,000 families in a weekly pop-up food pantry. Going above and beyond is in Latinos Progresando's DNA, and it all started with just one guy trying to help people. It is my pleasure to introduce to you LP's founder and CEO, Luis Gutierrez.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. When Latinos Progresando created MEX Talks, we set out to create a platform that would celebrate Mexican culture, highlight everything that Mexicans bring to this country, and use Mexican voices to tell Mexican stories. This is our 8th year hosting MEX Talks, but our first time going virtual. Our community has faced a lot this year, and it's taking a lot of hands and hearts to respond. While times like this remind us of our vulnerability, they also remind us how selfless and resilient our community is. That's why, for this year's MEX Talks, we wanted to talk about our own power to heal. Before I introduce today's lineup, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Constellation Brands, and all of the 2020 MEX Talk sponsors. Tonight's event will be centered around Black and Brown unity. We hope this event jumpstarts important self-reflection and conversation. We're excited to have 2 Chicago natives, José Olivarez, author of Citizens Illegal, and Leslé Honoré, a Blaxican artist, activist, and author of Fist and Fire. Enjoy.
Hello. What's going on? Latinos Progresando, MEX Talks, Chicago in the building. My name is José Guadalupe Olivarez. I'm really excited to be here with Leslé Honoré. And so we're gonna get into a conversation. We're gonna read some poems. I'm gonna kick us off and then we'll go back and forth. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I think that's all I need to say, right?
Yeah, get it.
Okay. The title of this poem is Mexican American Disambiguation. It's after a poet named Idris Goodwin. My parents are Mexican, who are not to be confused with Mexican Americans or Chicanos. I am a Chicano from Chicago, which means I'm a Mexican American with a fancy college degree and a few tattoos. My parents are Mexican, who are not to be confused with Mexicans still living in Mexico. Those Mexicans call themselves Mexicanos. White folks at parties call them pobrecitos. American colleges call them international students and diverse. My mom was white in Mexico and my dad was mestizo. And after they crossed the border, they became diverse and minorities and ethnic and exotic. But my parents call themselves Mexicanos, who again should not be confused for Mexicanos living in Mexico. Those Mexicanos might call my family gringos, which is the word my parents call white folks, and white folks call my parents interracial. Colleges say, put them on a brochure. My parents say, ¿qué significa esa palabra? I point out that all the men in my family marry lighter-skinned women. That's just the Chicano in me, which means it's the fancy college degrees in me, which is also diverse of me. Everything in me is diverse, even when I eat American foods like hamburgers, which, to clarify, are American when a white person eats them and diverse when my family eats them. So much of America can be understood like this. My parents were undocumented when they came to this country. And by undocumented, I mean sin papeles. And by sin papeles, I mean royally fucked, which should not be confused with the American dream, though the two are cousins. Colleges are not looking for undocumented diversity. My dad became a citizen, which should not be confused with keys to the house. We were safe from deportation, which should not be confused with walking the plank, though they're cousins. I call that sociology, but that's just the Chicano in me, who should not be confused with the diversity in me, or the Mexicano in me, who is constantly fighting with the upwardly mobile in me, who is good friends with the Mexican American in me, who the colleges love, but only on brochures, who the government calls non-white Hispanic or white Hispanic, who my parents call mijo, even when I don't come home so much.
I'm gonna be a cheering session because we can't hear everybody. Woo! Oh, that was so awesome. And without knowing it, we're both going to be talking about family and identity in our first two pieces because we did not share this before. So hi everybody, I'm Leslé Honoré. I'm the daughter of Rosalba Merida de Rodriguez, who is from Sinaloa, Culiacan, and I am very proud to be first generation. And actually I'm not a Chicago native. I grew up in Los Angeles. But I have been in Chicago for 21 years, and so that makes me a legal Chicago adult, and I am never leaving. So I've planted my roots here and had my babies here, and we are proud Chicagoans. And this poem that I'm going to read is new. It actually was written last night, and it's for my daughter, Sage. My daughter says to me, "Why is Latinidad always Selena and never Celia?" My daughter with cinnamon skin and oceans of black hair falling down her shoulders to her waist like midnight curls. My daughter says to me as we walk into our favorite restaurant, "Why do they always speak to you in Spanish and me in English while we are seated at the same table?" My daughter says to me, "What does it feel like to be accepted? To never have anyone question when you say you are Mexican? What does it feel like to belong to a people who belong to you and wear pride without explanation?" My daughter says to me, challenges me to see her the way the world sees her: Black first, woman next, Latina never. And I, with empty hands, heartbreaking, can only answer, "It is not your skin or your language or the miles that separate you from our home that makes you. It's sangre y hueso. It's your lineage. It's your mother's mother, 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 mother earth, reaching, stretching back before explorers and colonization and slavery and white skin. It's more than the traditions, assimilations, hope we forget. It is the soul of you, the heart of you, the dance in your smile, your abuelita's joy." And my daughter says to me, "That is still not enough. When I can only peer through windows, stand on the sidewalk, smell the air, and never be invited in." And we drive down 26th Street and wave our bandera and scream "Viva" into the night and honk our horns and laugh at the Trump piñatas and smile at the children on top of cars. And my daughter says to me, "We are so beautiful." And that makes me so sad. So that is my piece. Thank you. Thank you.
Yo, I love that poem. I can't believe you wrote that last night or recently within the last day.
Man, I was up last night. So we did our tradition and we went out and ate, and all of us piled into the car, and my daughter's boyfriend is visiting from Philadelphia because she can't go to college because COVID. And so we are driving down and just, you know, the miles and miles of representation, and we see how strong we are in numbers, and everybody is so happy and smiling, and it's overwhelming love. And then we have the really hard conversation of all of those things I just mentioned. Because she is the brownest of my children, it's a conversation we have often, you know, about her being very proud of her Mexican heritage. It's nothing that, you know, we don't lead with. And it is very difficult, you know, even for me to understand how she maneuvers through the world. And knowing it's been difficult for me to identify as both Black and Mexican, because like what we're going to talk about tonight, we know, if we're being honest, that one of the things America gives every immigrant wrapped in a beautiful bow is Black hate and anti-Blackness. They teach it to us the minute we even consider being American, and all of the legacy that this country has with Black people here is pushed upon us. And we hear uncomfortable conversations, and being both, I've been in both spaces and I've heard, you know, both sides, with both sides forgetting the fullness of what I am. But that's easier for me to maneuver, because when I am with any of my people, I don't ever feel rejected. Sometimes I have to explain a little bit more. But for my daughter, it has been very heartbreaking for her to hear anti-Blackness from her family. You know, to hear the things that we hear at dinner table sometimes, you know, ese negro, ese negra, you know, those conversations. And especially now, after the civil unrest that we've seen, and to experience what we experienced here in Chicago, it's been hard. It's been really, really hard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, I think the first question that I wanted to ask you is, they asked us to do this and to talk about, quote unquote, Black and brown unity. And I guess what is your reaction when you hear that phrase, when you hear Black and brown unity? Like, does that mean anything to you?
For me, it means revolution. For me, it means utopia. For me, it means if we ever get to that point of really being united, I don't think we really understand the power that we would wield together and the change that could happen because of it. But it also means being honest and transparent, and doing the work of healing is painful. Anybody who's gone to therapy, you don't heal by not talking about what hurts and naming it. And it takes time and honesty. But I think for me, you know, walking that space of two, it's essential. It is essential that we align ourselves with each other and know that the oppression that we experience all comes from the same fist. It's just different fingers in our different communities. What does it mean to you?
You know, well, first of all, let me say that I got chills when you talked about the potential of what that could be. I think for me, when I hear that phrase of Black and brown unity, it feels very premature in some ways, because it feels like we haven't done that hard therapeutic work that you're talking about. And it feels like a lot of times, you know, particularly non-Black Mexicans want to reach towards Black and brown unity, but only when it benefits us, and not showing up for Black people when they need us to show up for them. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to understand that. And so when I hear that phrase, it's like, yes, I agree, absolutely. It sounds utopic. It sounds like, you know, wresting the power away, particularly if we're thinking locally about politics in Chicago, what that would mean for the city, I think is monumental. But in order to get there, we have, like you said, right, we have to be honest. Non-Black Latinos and non-Black Mexicans have to be honest about, you know, anti-Blackness and what we were taught by this country and what is actually true. And we have to like wrestle with our own, you know, belief in this like aspirational American dream that has left out a lot of Black people, you know, on purpose. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I think it sounds aspirational, and it's not that I'm not with it, but I think before we can even kind of say those words, the first thing that we have to do is kind of have a conversation amongst ourselves to understand how we need to show how, and let me be specific here, right? Like to understand how non-Black Latinos and non-Black Mexicans can continue to show up for Black people in the city of Chicago, not just when it benefits us, but all the time, always.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what happens is because we are fighting our own struggles so hard, you know, we forget that it's connected, that gentrification in Pilsen is connected to displacement on the south side of Chicago. They're all coming from the same capitalistic place that is seeking to take advantage and oppress us. So we get tired, and, you know, we don't know, you know, how am I supposed to show up for somebody else when I'm having a hard time showing up for myself. And my work husband, Roberto, had a really a good analogy for this. This was at the beginning of COVID, and we were getting ready to go support someone. And we both talk about, you know, not pouring from an empty cup. And he said, sometimes you just show up with your empty cup. That sometimes that's all you have to show up with is an empty cup. But showing up with the cup means something. It means I'm here for you to pour into or for me to pour out of, but I'm being present. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough.
Absolutely. Hearing that, you know, made me think about, so the last time that I was living in Chicago, and I'm in Harlem right now, but the last time that I was living in Chicago, I was living in South Shore, which is a primarily Black neighborhood in Chicago. And I really love that neighborhood. And sometimes when I rode the bus to work, there would be these kind of, there would be these posters up on the bus stops that, you know, kind of, they were like part conspiracies and then part facts, right? And so when I was listening to you talk, it made me think about how there's like a lot of misinformation between groups, right? So like one of the things that these posters would say would be like, you know, don't listen to, at the time it was Rahm Emanuel, right? But it was like, don't listen to Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel wants all the Mexicans to come in and take our jobs. And so it's very easy to dismiss that, but at the same time, like there is some truth in those fears, right? Like there is, like, because we are often competing for kind of the leftovers of capitalism, it can feel like if one group is getting something, it is at the detriment of another, as opposed to like, we're both still a lot of times fighting over crumbs of this like larger piece of the pie.
And the pie is there to get. And I think that's the lie that we're told, is that all there is available are crumbs. And so we have to fight each other to get it. But we get distracted from there's a pie. There's a whole, I almost cursed. There's a whole big pie.
Are we not allowed to curse? I'm for sure going to curse later. I think I already cursed.
I curse so much. But I'm gonna try to be a lady. I'm gonna try to be a fucking lady. I did it. Ah! I'm glad my mom is not watching. She's in LA, probably having dinner right now. But woo, I'd get in trouble. But yeah, that is how. So the conversations in, you know, Black communities are that they feel that they have not been fully accepted as American, and America was built on enslaved people's blood, sweat, and tears, and then hundreds of years of denial of even being seen as a full human. And so, you know, the lie that they're told is that, you know, immigrants are taking your birthright. And then, you know, what we're told as Mexicans is that, you know, Black people are, you know, lazy, are criminals, shouldn't be trusted, and who we are, you know, putting ourselves above. And until we call those things out and say what we have been told and address the lies, there's still going to be so much work that needs to be done. So I think we got the warning to move to the next poem.
Yes.
So I think I go first now. A mí me toca. Okay.
Vamos.
This piece is new too. So I've got 2 new pieces today and 1 piece from my book. This piece was written after we heard about the sterilizations that were happening, and I'm going to call them concentration camps in Georgia. And a very brave Black woman, Dawn Wooten, is the whistleblower, and we should protect her at all costs, because we also know that other whistleblowers have systematically disappeared. And so sometimes it feels like the end of the world, everything that has been happening. I mean, the world is on fire. We have a pandemic. We still have, babies in cages and people in internment camps. Right now, I mean, it feels like pages out of, a dystopian novel, and but it's happening. And I think we've got to the point where we're a little numb to it all, but we can't let ourselves get numb to the anger. And so this piece was written for that. It's called Let Me Sing a Song of America. How consistent you are in your horror, in your grotesque, in your denial, how you tuck brown and Black bodies in the folds of your hate to erase our faces, our humanity, our lives, leaving behind trails of trauma, a millennia of oppression, tears that have filled oceans, salty, pain covering the earth, white hands reaching inside our bodies, ripping out our wombs, ripping away our children, tossing them in cages, animals to gawk at and forget, to disappear into the whiteness like a fog surrounding you, draining you, killing you, waving stars and stripes over the mass American graves. American earth is a cemetery. Brown and Black bodies tossed into its depth, no headstone to mark the death from which the fertilizer and all of American greatness grows. White men in white coats with steel knives mumbling that we don't need anesthesia, we don't need to reproduce, sterilization to control us, limit us, punish us. We are here to satisfy lust and curiosity. Quickly, the world is bored of our agony. The silent suffering is preferred. The outrage disappears. The newborn allies take off their shirts and put down their signs. And we women, we brown women, cannot take off our skin. What more do you want, America? You take our bodies, our babies, our lives. Are you looking for the soul of us that does not bleed? The soul of us that will not yield, the soul of us that you can never touch, the soul of us that flies to the heavens on Black and orange butterfly wings where your evil cannot reach.
Wow. Give it up wherever you're at. Give it up.
Thank you.
So
I know it's heavy.
Yeah.
I got a drink.
You saw me take a sip. The title of this poem is Mexican American Obituary. It's after a poet named Pedro Pietri, who's an incredible Nuyorican, Puerto Rican poet. This is how it goes. Mexican American Obituary. Juan, Lupe, Lorena became American this way, serving crackers at a picnic while a strange wind swung through the branches carrying names. Juan, Lupe, Lorena died this way too, silently, while Trump won the presidency and police kept killing their Black neighbors and relatives. Juan died saying it was none of his business. Lupe died believing their degrees would save them. Lorena died after loading the gun and handing it over to the policeman who aimed it at her whole family. Juan, Lupe, Lorena, all died yesterday, today, and will die again tomorrow. Asking Black people to die more quietly, asking white people not to turn the gun on us.
Woo! Okay. So we are just coming with all the heavy right now.
Got very heavy, took a turn.
Yeah, but it's the realness of what we are living. And I think when we, in both cases, whether it's federally sanctioned murder and child abduction and kidnapping and sterilization, or a police state allowed murder and death that continuously goes unpunished and unresolved, you know, and you said the worst word that there is to say right now, which is Trump. Like, that is the most foul, disgusting, pus-filled word possible. And yet we have, you know, Latinos and Black Americans who openly support someone whose administration is focused on all of our demise. I don't even know how do we unpack both of those together, Jose? How do we do that?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer. I think maybe we should start with your poem and thinking about Dawn Wooten and the step that she took to be a whistleblower, to protect people that, you know, perhaps she could have just as easily looked away, you know? But here she is protecting people. So I guess what struck you when you heard that story and you learned that the whistleblower, the one that led us to know about the forced sterilization at various ICE detention camps, that it was a Black woman who was the whistleblower?
It made me really proud. It was like, if we continue to do this for each other, because they don't expect us to speak up for each other. They absolutely expect us to speak up for ourselves, but they don't expect us to speak up for each other. And if we continue to do that and honor that and understand the courage that takes, that's how we start to move the needle. Because how many people saw what was happening and said nothing? How many women, how many men, how many people saw that? Because it didn't just happen. You know, it's been happening, and went home to their families and cooked dinner and went to ball games and, you know, watched their novelas or their soap operas or whatever, and were able to compartmentalize that as if it was okay. Like the level of cognitive dissonance that is needed to be an American without angst about what's happening is I don't know how even psychiatrists can, you know, fix that. I don't know how you move in the world and see atrocities and it not gut you and urge you to do more. But let's talk about your piece too, about it's none of my business. I think what we heard a lot of here in Chicago, I don't know why they're rioting. I don't know, you know, what's that have to do with me? Why are they coming in my neighborhood? It's none of my business. And it's like, but it is. It's all of our business.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for me, in Chicago, it makes so much sense. So, for example, I always think about the work of an organization called Organized Communities Against Deportation. And I think about their work because they draw the connection between the work that, you know, pro-migrant organizations are doing to try and get ICE out of Chicago, right? And to try to protect people from deportations. They connect that work to the work that various Black activists are doing to try and get police out of their neighborhoods, right? And it makes a lot of sense because in Chicago, there's this thing called the gang database that is used both by police officers to harass young Black people and by ICE officials to try and get a reason to deport someone, to detain someone and put them into these facilities, right? And so to me, like, what I want, like when I wrote that poem, I was thinking about how, like, I don't know what the word is, but how, you know, you were talking about like what it takes to kind of turn away from everything that is happening every day, right? And I looked at people who at the same time were like angry about, you know, people they knew being harassed over their legal status, right? Over their citizenship. And then we're so willing to put faith in police the next second. Like it boggled my mind.
It's you can't spell ICE. I mean, you can't spell police without ICE. They're the same. They just wear different uniforms. But they are the same entity. That is, the only purpose of them is to control us. I mean, we did not have police prior to slavery. They were created after slaves were free to ensure that they would be able to still carry on a slave state. So I'm like, how long does it take us to make those connections? You know,
right.
they're paid from the same bucket, theoretically, they're trained the same way. And, you know, their whole purpose is to control us and to see us as less than human, and to continue to dehumanize us.
Absolutely. And especially when I think about like, what is the actual job of police officers, right? And it's not like the movie, you know, image of a police officer that's like protecting us from bad guys. Like, that's not actually the real work police do. The real work that police do is just like taxing poor communities over and over again, harassing us from living our lives. The other thing, you know, you mentioned that police were not a thing until the era of slavery, when people were running away. Like, police started as slave catchers, as the catchers of enslaved people. But the other thing that I think gets lost in these discussions is, like, part of the reason why the United States went to war with Mexico was because Mexico had abolished slavery.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? So the United States was tired, in part, of enslaved people running south to freedom. And so they wanted, so it just feels like, again, particularly when I think about non-Black Mexicans, it's just like a lot of short-sightedness, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's so much ignorance on both ends because we're not even taught our own histories here. So we are definitely not taught each other's histories and how they intersect. Like, I love every Cinco de Mayo, I do a post that explains what Cinco de Mayo is. And I always end with, and now you can have a taco. But it's not Mexican Independence Day. But I think what I probably should be talking, you know, not just about the Battle of Puebla, but why the Battle of Puebla was important to the liberations of slaves and to the Civil War. That without that, it may have had a very different outcome. We are all very interconnected. And when we start to peel it back and we see how we're interconnected is where we start to see where we can grow power with each other.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think absolutely we can grow power with each other. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add. I think what you said makes a lot of sense.
Let's touch upon a little bit of cultural pride and how do we celebrate our cultures. You go first.
How do I personally celebrate my culture?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so this is the thing, right? Like, both of my parents are from Jalisco, Mexico. They grew up in a small town called Cañadas de Obregón. The thing that I've been thinking about is like, there's so many aspects of Mexican culture that I love. And in relationship to these questions though, the thing that I ask myself is like, are we just going to like, are we going to settle for Mexican culture just being about like eating tacos and drinking cervezas? You know what I mean? Like if that's all that it is, then keep that shit. You know what I'm saying? Because if we're not actually going to participate in like an interconnected struggle with one another, then like I don't want my culture to be just some shit that like, you know, you wear on holidays or you eat on Taco Tuesdays or whatever. So I don't know, but that's where my mind went after you asked that question.
I think we got the 30-second warning from the powers that be. So why don't you, how do you want to do? Do you want to do your piece and then we can pick up the cultural conversation and then I'll close this out?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good. I think also if you want to jump in real quick and then I could read my poem and go back like that.
So it's funny that you bring food up because my mom is from Sinaloa. She immigrated when she was 15 with my great grandmother. And then when she married my dad is from New Orleans, Louisiana. And it was my grandmother until she passed away when I was 13, who was really the person who connected me to my culture. She refused to speak English. Like she didn't cook what my dad liked, she cooked what she liked. And so that was really her focus. So for some reason, a lot of the way I feel like I connect is through cooking and trying to cook as much like traditional as possible and not fall into the traps of what Americans think Mexican food is. And so just trying to discover that and do it regionally, it has been something that has been really cool to do with my kids. And it grounds me a lot. I think a lot of the work that I do is so much about the fight, and to take a moment out and just ground myself in the taste and smells and the connections. That way I love. But it is not Cinco de Mayo or Taco Tuesday, and I don't even like beer. So
I love beer personally. Like I was so hyped to see that Modelo sponsored this event because I stay drinking Modelos.
I love Modelo. Yay, Modelo.
Yeah, shout out to Modelo. If you are a Modelo representative and you are watching this and you want to sponsor a couple poets, listen.
I'll do a taste test. I mean, I actually I like Modelo Black, but if we could have an event that makes me fall in love with cervezas, I'll write a poem about it. I'm so present.
Let's do it, Modelo. That's the challenge. So I see that we have the Q&A session shortly, but I think we should go ahead and read our last poems and then jump into this Q&A, right? Excellent. Yeah. So I'm gonna read my last poem. This poem is called Mexican Heaven.
I love it.
This is how it goes. Mexican Heaven. 1, all of the Mexicans sneak into heaven. St. Peter has their name on the list, but none of the Mexicans have trusted a list since Ronald Reagan was president. 2, St. Peter is a Mexican named Pedro, but he's not a saint. Pedro waits at the gate with a shot of tequila to welcome all the Mexicans to heaven, but he gets drunk and forgets about the list. All the Mexicans walk into heaven, even our no good cousins who only go to church for baptisms and funerals. 3, it turns out God is one of those religious Mexicans who doesn't drink or smoke weed, so all the Mexicans in heaven party in the basement while God reads the Bible and thumbs a rosary. God threatens to kick all the Mexicans out of heaven si no paran con las pendejadas, so the Mexicans drink more discreetly. They smoke outside where God won't smell the weed. God pretends the Mexicans are reformed. Hallelujah. This cycle repeats once a month. Amen. 4, Jesus has a tattoo of La Virgen de Guadalupe covering his back. It turns out he's your cousin Jesus from the block. It turns out he gets reincarnated every day and no one on earth cares all that much. 5, all the Mexican women refuse to cook or clean or raise the kids or pay bills or make the bed or drive you to work or do anything except watch their novelas. So heaven is gross. The rats are fat as roosters and the men die of starvation. 6, there are white people in heaven too. They built condos across the street and asked the Mexicans to speak English. I'm just kidding. There are no white people in heaven.
That's my favorite part.
I can't believe they let me publish that. 7, tamales, tacos, tostadas, tortas, pozole, sopes, huaraches, menudo, horchata, jamaica, limonada, agua. 8, St. Peter lets Mexicans into heaven, but only to work in the kitchens. A Mexican dishwasher polishes the crystal, smells the meals, and hears the music. They dream of another heaven, one they might be allowed in if only they work hard enough.
I could talk about that poem all damn day. I could talk about like the concepts of the perfect immigrant, and you know, if we just work a little bit harder, we'll be accepted and it'll be fine. We could talk about gentrification. We could talk about being asked not to speak Spanish. My ex-husband, he's my ex-husband for a reason, but I remember his family. Oh yeah, we don't have time to unpack that. And then like everybody watching will be looking for his address so they could drive to his house and roll like we roll when we get pissed off when somebody hurts one of our daughters. But his family would be like, you're only teaching your kids Spanish so you can talk about us. And I'm like, yes, and.
You're like, you're not wrong, and.
And it also has other, things like just connecting us. But, I love that. I love that piece so much. And I'm sorry to any white people that we offended. Not really, but
I'm not sorry.
I'm not sorry. We can imagine our own heaven. And God, I'm hungry now. What was that, number 7? Or was that 7 or was that 8?
That was
when
7.
you named everything. 7, when you named everything I want to eat right now. Yes, so let's see what we've got. We've got start Q&A right now. Yes, we've got questions. So
okay.
Where do we find our inspiration? For me, like I said tonight, a lot of my writing, and so if anybody follows me on social media, the majority of my writing that I post is about the social injustices that we are experiencing. And I try to write within a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. So it is current and about what's happening. So a lot of my inspiration comes very immediately, and really since 2016, when we really started to see the uptick of seeing police violence with immediacy, I've had a ton to write about. And it comes very quickly like that. Sometimes I write about other stuff, but mainly I'm writing about what it means to be Black and brown and navigate the world. What about you, Jose?
Well, real quick, will you tell people where they can follow you so they can read all of your incredible poems?
Absolutely. You can follow me on all the social media platforms, and it's just my name. And thank you, Jose, for putting some respect on my acentos. It's just Leslé Honoré at all of there's nothing fancy. I don't have any stage name. So Facebook and Instagram, Leslé Honoré Poetry on Facebook. Twitter, not so much, because I'm not very economical with my words. I talk a lot. So that I'm there, but it just doesn't work. And what about you? You're not on Facebook. You're on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter mostly. I'm at _José Olivarez, which is my name. And then in terms of where I find my inspiration, I tend to find inspiration in a lot of things. A lot of times I think I end up writing poems thinking about some of the like smart, brilliant, or funny things that my friends say or that my family members say. I'll try and think about like, you know, when they said that, that's a poem. So let me see if I can figure out how to make it a poem.
Yeah.
So sometimes it starts that way. Other times it's just like pieces of language that get stuck in my head. So it kind of depends. I try not to rely on inspiration too much because inspiration comes and goes, right? Like sometimes, like I just try to like show up and write and try to write as much as possible.
Yeah, that
So I see.
sounds like a discipline I don't have.
Listen, it doesn't always work for me. That's my aspiration. You know, I'm not saying that I succeed 100% of the time.
I think you do. I think you do. We've got the question of how to kickstart the anti-Blackness conversation with my immigrant parents. First, get a drink. No, just kidding. For me, I think, you know, not thinking of it as a big, like, because you're not going to sit down your parents and say, we're going to talk about anti-Blackness, because that's just, you know, not going to go well. And that's not going to be embraced. But I think if you can stop it as you hear it, if you hear things, you know, in a conversation or at the table or out grocery shopping or driving, those little things that our families say and have just continued to say, and if you can stop it there and discuss that one moment, it can lead into the bigger conversations. What about you? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think challenging it as it happens. I think that a lot of times these roots of anti-Blackness are really lazy. Like our parents are not just our parents, but our family members pick that stuff up lazily, and they don't stop to actually think about it and question, like, do I actually believe this? Where did I learn this? And so I think just trying to ask them questions and challenging them on it as those moments pop up. I think that would be my advice too, I think.
I think if we also have conversations about colorism in our communities and where it comes from, you know, the legacy of colonialism, you know, when a baby is born, it's, oh, mira, tiene ojos claros, and, you know, why that is so important, and why when we turn on our television stations, we see people who look very European, and we don't see people who look, you know, indigenous at all. Sometimes if we frame it in our context and then show a mirror of how it shows up in other places, can be a really good tool as well, because, I mean, we don't have time to talk about it tonight, but it's important. So the question that just popped up, I think, in relation to that is, in order to heal, we need to ask, where is the trauma and pain coming from? So for me, the trauma and pain is coming from colonizers. We were all okay in our lands, in our cultures, and our traditions before people started to come and kill and steal and colonize us, and embed within us self-hate, embed within us a desire to be proximal to whiteness for protection, and embed within us the mindset of fighting over, you know, crumbs instead of desiring the pie. What do you think?
So I have a couple thoughts. One, real quick, to go back to the question before, you know, I think, and it's related to this one, right? But like my parents, when they immigrated to the United States, it was, as far as I can tell, for two reasons, right? Like one, because there just weren't enough job opportunities in their small town in Mexico. And they, you know, they thought that moving to the United States, they would have more opportunities, right? And then two, there is this like belief in some sort of American dream, right? But I think you can unpack the ways that those are myths, right? Like with my family, I always think about the fact that like my dad had a union job, right? He had the job that you wanted, and then the steel mills closed and my dad did not have a job, and then our house was foreclosed, right? Like my dad did everything right, but capitalism did its capitalist thing, and my family ended up in trouble, right? And so you can show them how, just like, you know, my family's not necessarily to blame for that trouble, that, you know, that there is a such thing as like systemic, you know what I'm saying? Like you can show them how these things impact us and that it's not just make believe. In terms of where is the trauma and pain coming from? I agree with what you were saying, Leslé, which is that it's colonization, and we tend to think of colonization as something that ended when the Spanish left, you know, in the 1800s, but that's not true, right? After the end of Spanish colonialism, we get the beginning of United States colonialism, right? And so we have to understand that it's not just one colonial power that we have to kind of learn to push back against, but also this other one, right? And that I think gets us closer to thinking about the ways that trying to be proximate to whiteness is not ultimately useful for us.
Yeah. Spot on. Our last question is, what brings you joy? What brings you joy, Jose?
That's a great question. Right now, it's the NBA playoffs. So right now, Jimmy Butler is leading the Miami Heat in the playoffs. And that brings me joy because I remember when Jimmy Butler was playing for my beloved Chicago Bulls. So I'm rooting for Jimmy, and I'm having a lot of fun talking trash with my friends about basketball. So that's what's bringing me joy right now. What about
Love
you?
it. I'm a Lakers fan, diehard, and also a diehard Los Dodgers fan.
Los Dodgers.
Los Dodgers. But about our conversation earlier, carnitas brings me joy. And we know the best carnitas are carnitas Urupan. So sorry, I know that's not your favorite.
I know. I just want to say for the audience, you weren't here earlier, the real love battle is between carnitas, because me, myself, I'm a Don Pedro's carnitas person. So shout out to Don Pedro. I haven't met you in real life, but wherever you're at, just know that I appreciate your craft work.
And for me, it's carnitas Urupan, and that's my go-to place, and that is what brings me joy. And during the beginning part of the pandemic, when I discovered that they would deliver, it was a religious moment. It was that brings me a lot of joy. This brings me joy because I feel like you are my new brother, and connecting
Likewise.
like
Thank
this
you so much.
Brings me joy. Oh, thank you. This was so awesome. So we've got our 30-second warning until my closing piece. And it's a joyful piece. So one of the biggest things that brings me joy are my kids. So I have 3 kids. Sage, who is 20 and a painter, Solomon, who is 17 and a senior in high school, and just loving and funny and huge. And my youngest, Scarlett Rosalba, named after my mom, they bring me joy in sharing my pride in all of our cultures, and seeing them share it with their friends and each other. That is legacy to me, and that brings me a lot of joy. So the last poem I'm going to do is in my book. So I have a book. It's called Fist and Fire, and that's my butt on the cover. You have a book too. You have a book, and you're in an anthology.
I do. This is the book. It's called Citizen Illegal. It's got artwork by Scent Rock on the cover. Shout out to Scent Rock.
And my artwork on the cover is by David Anthony Geary, who is a Chicago artist and my best friend. And so this piece is called Brown Girl. Brown girl, brown girl, what do you see? I see a world that thinks it's better than me. Brown girl, what do you do? I paint, run, and sing, and sometimes I flew. Brown girl, what do you know? That sometimes my skin folk don't want me to grow. Brown girl, what do you feel? That it takes more than magic to help us all heal. Brown girl, what do you see? A world that sees my skin before it sees me. Brown girl, what you gonna do? Gonna march, fight, and create till I make this world new. Brown girl, how are you so strong? 'Cause I got queens in my blood to help push me along.
Yes. Oh my God.
This was
beautiful.
so dope. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Likewise.
And we're gonna have a carnitas battle and a beer tasting sponsored by Modelo.
Yeah, shout out to Modelo, shout out to Carnitas Urapan, shout out to Carnitas Don Pedro. Thank you, Latinos Progresando. Thank you, Next Talks.
Thank you
Leslé
for
Honoré.
this platform. José Olivarez, love, cyber hugs.
Thank you so much, everyone.
That concludes our program. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors and to you at home for being here. To learn more about other events in the MEX Talk series, go to www.latinospro.org/MEXTalks. You can also watch past MEX Talks videos on Latinos Progresando's YouTube channel. To support LP and the amazing work they do for our community, you can make a donation at latinospro.org/donate. You can even sign up for a monthly pledge. Make sure you follow Latinos Progresando at Latinos Pro on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter to always have the latest. Thank you.